Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reverend Hunter podcast. This is Tony Jones, a.k.a. the Reverend Hunter, joined, as always, through the tubes and wires by producer extraordinaire, Brandon. Brandon, I think I've used that one before.
That's okay. I'm probably more comfortable with that one at this point. It's a word that I'm actually familiar with using. So.
Sorry to rehash the adjectives. I should have pulled out the thesaurus before we started today.
It's more natural with extraordinary. I'm okay with that.
You run out. After what are we at? We're getting close to a couple dozen episodes here of the Reverend Hunter podcast. So, I mean, how many can we even come up with?
How have things been as of late?
I've been good, really good. You know, it's hunting season.
I know.
It is it's exciting. I had my pheasant hunting buddies over to my backyard, and I grilled the last of. First of all, we've been like eating wild game for every meal because I'm trying to clean out the freezer. I'm not one of these guys who likes to dig back into the freezer and be like, "Oh, I found a venison shank from 2017. Let's see how that is." I'm like, I try to eat and serve and all the stuff I got from the previous season before the new season starts. So I did the old classic, which is I took some jalapeno peppers from my garden, cut those in half and seeded them out, and then you fill them with cream cheese. And you put a strip of pheasant or any game bird on top of that, and then you wrap it in bacon and grill it.
That's amazing.
Dude, it is a tasty little morsel.
Oh wow, that sounds really good.
Yeah, and then I found 3 bags of ducks. So I'm pretty hardcore about I don't breast out ducks that are good roasters. So I had 3 bags of duck breast in the freezer. I thawed them out. I bought some pork fat and I ground it all up and made duck sausage. It's a recipe called Hunter sausage from Hank Shaw's cookbook, Duck, Duck, Goose. And dude, so good.
Really?
Oh my gosh.
What did you use to make the sausages? Did you have any help with any equipment?
Well, funny you should ask, but thanks to Walton's and the guys at the Meatgistics podcast, I have such a great grinder and sausage stuffer now that it made the prep of this really. So I mean, really, in the past, I always dreaded. I would have one or two. So I'd have probably 2 sausage making days of my whole year, and I just dreaded it because it took forever. And I'm not exaggerating just because they sponsor this podcast by sending us some gear. It really was a total pain because at first I was one of these guys. I used my KitchenAid, a KitchenAid attachment. I kept breaking it because those are all plastic implements that get. And then I bought something off of Craigslist and it was better, but it just took forever. But man, with this Walton's gear, making sausage is such a breeze. It's takes me an hour, to basically grind it twice and then pipe it into sausage casings. So it's a pleasure to do it and people love it. And it's a great way to serve duck and goose to people who find the taste of duck and goose a little strong.
Sure.
When you just, grill it or whatever. So that was awesome. Man, I could just go on and on just because it's hunting season. I mean, last weekend I was up north. I was moving deer stands around based on where I'm seeing deer in our trail cameras. And I'll tell you what, buddy, this is good news for you. I saw a lot of squirrels on those trail cameras.
Good. I have so many squirrels in my yard here in Minneapolis that I'm hankering to get a little vengeance on these squirrels.
Well, you're going to have a chance because you and I have finally got a date on the books, and it looks like if the stars align, this coming Sunday, you and I will go out squirrel hunting. So we're gonna. I think you can buy an apprentice hunting license since you haven't been through gun safety yet, and I can show you around how to use a 22, and we can go out and I bet you and I can whack a few squirrels and then clean them, and you can bring them home to your girlfriend and say, honey, squirrel for dinner.
It's what she's always wanted, just for me to bring home some dead squirrels. So it turns out we're going to kill a couple birds with one stone. So this will be great.
I actually got a text from a friend who is a faithful listener of the show. Shout out to Mike Stavland. And he texted me and said something like, I can't wait to hear Brandon's like primitive scream when he kills his first squirrel. So
I'll make sure to have some audio recording going.
I mean, you're even just on my phone or whatever. We're gonna have to document your first kill.
That's funny.
So that should be fun. And I'm looking forward to it. And then I guess we'll break it down in future episode intros. It'll be some good podcast content.
Speaking of look at us both go.
Great minds think alike, bro. Were you about to say, speaking of great podcast content?
That's literally exactly what I was going to say. And then I was going to segue into our wonderful guest this week, Billy Vaughn.
Yeah, man. Billy, I met Billy a few years ago. He took a class that I teach at Fuller Seminary. Fuller Seminary is based in California, but I teach a class every few years for them to doctoral students, and we go canoeing in the Boundary Waters. And Billy and his wife April came on that trip, and he took it for credit and is getting his doctorate in it's called a D-Min degree, a doctorate of ministry at Fuller Seminary. But I was so intrigued by both of them and their journey, and particularly Billy, having been a Marine for over 2 decades, then left the Marine Corps, went to seminary, spent some of his time at seminary living in a van on Skid Row, and then moved to Arkansas and started basically a working farm, like a kind of a hobby farm for a lot of guys in recovery, guys getting out of jail. It's just, what a story, huh? I mean, you heard the interview. It's really fascinating stuff.
The amount of stuff he's put into his, fairly short life it's absolutely mind-blowing. He's experienced, I don't know, so much more, so many things you see in movies. He's actually experienced in real life, from his military service to, like you said, being on Skid Row and being out there, and not even just helping out the community there, but living in the community there too. So it's a cool story.
That's right. And there are a couple of really intriguing things I find about Billy. One is the way, I mean, being a pretty progressive guy, still the way he talks about guns and firearms is, I mean, for me, we talk about that. I don't think I would talk publicly about firearms the way he does, because I'd be afraid of the judgment I would get from people. But he really talks about his love for guns, which is interesting. And then he told part of the story that I'd never heard before, that I thought was fascinating. Was you'll hear on the interview part of the podcast here that he was on the roof in Fallujah on his 3rd combat deployment when an airstrike blew up a building that they were targeting. And I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but he really had kind of what you'd call a conversion experience, which is so profound. And anyway, what a great guy. And he's also a hunter, and he's after a buck this fall called Big Nasty. So if Billy is able to drop Big Nasty, we will get a picture, and we'll let our listeners know on the podcast. You can support Billy and his wife at their website, sanctuaryfarm.org. I'd really encourage you to check out what they do there. And if you got a few bucks at the end of the year, you want to make a donation. I can tell you, I can't imagine you giving it to a better organization than Sanctuary Farm. They're just doing incredible work. And it's just the two of them, Billy and April, and they're just bootstrapping it the whole way. So he's really a fantastic guy. In this interview, I'm so proud that we could get him on the podcast. All right, here's my conversation with my dear friend, Billy Vaughn. Billy, welcome to the Reverend Hunter podcast.
Thank you, Tony. It's good to be here.
Man, it's been, you and I haven't seen each other for, 3 years probably, huh?
Yeah, I think that trip we took was in the Boundary Waters. I think that was about 3 years ago.
Yeah. So there's so many things I want to talk to you about, but I'd love to talk to you first to hear about, I want to see if I remember this right. What I remember is when you got out of your military service, you went to seminary at Fuller Seminary, where I also went to seminary. You went many years later than me, but
Talbot,
you did
actually.
You went to Talbot.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, and then you're getting your you're getting your doctorate of ministry.
Right.
So you saw the error of your ways after
Correct.
your master's, and you're getting your doctorate. Okay, because that's where just so listeners know, you came on a boundary. You and your wife April came on a Boundary Waters trip that I led, and you actually took it as a course for your Doctor of Ministry program at Fuller Seminary, where I teach in that Doctor of Ministry
Correct.
program, and that's where you and I came to cross paths for the first time. And your work, I will say, was outstanding, my friend. Outstanding.
I appreciate that.
Very impressed with your work. Okay, so you're at Talbot in Los Angeles. And were you living on Skid Row? Were you ministering on Skid Row? Like, tell me about that. So refresh my memory.
Yeah, sure. So I served as a chaplain at a rescue mission there on Skid Row, and I was there about 5 years. And during that time, I actually moved up to LA, and so I lived in Little Tokyo, which is right next door to Skid Row. And then my final probably 3 to 6 months, I actually lived in a van on the street. My wife she kind of was the advance party for coming out here to Arkansas to the farm, while I lived in the van and kind of finished up things in LA.
Okay, dude, you were you living in the van by choice or out of necessity?
Sure.
Yeah, I thought by choice, right?
Sure. Yeah, I was living by choice, mainly because I wanted to experience, what that was like. Not the experience of living homeless. I mean, I was a Marine for 21 years, so I knew what it was like to live on the ground and all of that, live in the dirt. But more just when people think you're experiencing homelessness on the street, like when you walk by them or they drive by or whatever, I realize they look at you differently.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to experience what that was like. And it was interesting, challenging.
Tell me about it. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it was challenging, but like what were your big impressions about that?
Yeah. Well, the hardest logistical obstacle was just bathrooms and trying to figure out where to use a bathroom and when and all of that. So I had to come up with a routine at Starbucks, and they started locking their bathrooms. And so I had to figure all that out. But what was probably most profound was just the looks that I had never experienced before of, in the morning when I'm walking on the street and I got a backpack. And so people assume that I had spent the night on the street. And so that look of, oh, you're one of those. And Yeah, yeah, that was interesting. It was like you know, I'm sure we've all experienced this where we're just busy. We have our schedule. We don't want to be bothered with someone,
Yeah.
and so I would get that look of keep your distance from me
Hmm.
type of look. Yeah.
Tell me about the people who live on Skid Row, or even about is there one guy you remember that kind of can encapsulate for us the kind of person you worked with there?
Sure. There was a guy that I worked with that was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, and he was self-aware enough to know um, that the voices weren't real,
Mm.
uh, but in some ways, he enjoyed them, or the way he described it is they kept him company, and so
Oh.
the medication that he would take, they would make the voices go away, but because he was just kind of an unusual person. I think people oftentimes kept their distance from him. So because of that, he would skip the medication because the voices would come back and they would keep him company. So we would talk about this, and I could
Hmm.
ask him what the voices were telling him at the moment, like when he was sitting talking to me, which usually was, don't trust him. He wants you to take those meds that make us go away, type of stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So really, really fascinating, but also just recognizing him living in this kind of alternate reality to some degree. Um, I think that is, from my experience, what people miss is, like, how could you look at somebody living on the street? How could they live that way? Why would they
Yeah.
choose that? Well, oftentimes they're not as aware, or their perspective is different of that reality than ours might be from the outside.
Did you run into a lot of veterans on Skid Row?
Some, not a lot. From my experience, the VA is very good at addressing veteran
Okay.
homelessness. So there is a hotline. If the veteran wants to get help, typically the veteran can get help with
Hmm.
with that type of stuff. But a few, or oftentimes the veterans I ran into were veterans from way back, from even the 70s and 80s, and so they were already plugged into the uh, the VA,
Okay.
but they were also either by choice living on the street, or maybe they were living in the mission. You know.
Yeah. Um, I want to backtrack a little bit before we get back into your seminary and the work you did there, and then what you're doing now. But I have to confess that I don't. Not only do I not have military service, there's like in my whole extended family, I can think of two people who were in the military, two cousins whom I don't really know that well. I track back to even my parents weren't, my grandparents weren't. I don't think any of my great grandparents were in the military. So that's just one of those things that has not been a part of my experience in my history. So like I never even really considered it going into the military. What why did you go? What drew you into the military? Was that something that was part of your family, or your own personal draw, or how'd you end up there?
It was a little part of my family. My dad had been in the army during the 1950s, and so he always talked about the military and how it is. It's a good choice, at least initially, if you don't want to go to school, which I which I didn't. But
Okay. Where'd you grow up?
yeah. Oh, so I grew up in the booming metropolis of Pocahontas, Arkansas, which is
Okay. Okay.
which is a town of about 6,000 people, and
Uh-huh.
not much changes here.
Okay.
Um, and I'm back in this area. I live about 20 miles outside of the town on my farm, but um, I knew from about the age of 12 that I wanted to join the military, and I would love to say that it was patriotism or nationalism or any of those types of things, but I just wanted to get the heck out of Pocahontas. That's why I
Really?
joined.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And why the Marine Corps?
Um, it seemed the hardest. The only thing I knew was from movies, and so it seemed like it would be the most challenging, and that was what I was interested in.
Hmm. And was it? I imagine it was extremely challenging.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Although I did do some training with the Army. I did Ranger School and Jump School and some other schools with the Army. Actually,
Okay.
Ranger School was by far the most challenging, way more challenging than boot camp. I would even argue more challenging than all three of my combat tours. I mean, it was,
Really? Tell me about
yeah.
that.
I mean,
Like
I lost.
what
I
goes
mean,
what goes on there at Ranger School?
well, they basically starve you and they don't give you any sleep. I mean, I lost 45 pounds. I was 120 pounds
Come on,
when I
dude.
graduated. I'm 5'8", 120 pounds. Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, you're essentially a zombie for the majority of that school. Now it's changed some, but when I went through in the early '90s, it was like one meal a day. There was really no mandated sleep they had to give you. It was essentially torture. It
Wow.
was really torture. Yeah,
And how'd you make it?
yeah. But
Guys must have been people must have been bailing out or not making it.
sure, yeah, hmm
Let me ask you about
yeah.
that. What do you think? Well, yeah, like what mental toughness does it take, or like how did you have the mental toughness to survive that?
Part of it was, I'd say, a large part of it was being a Marine, like being representative of the Marine Corps in this,
Oh,
sister service school. So it's like I can't quit. I can't, disgrace the Marine Corps by quitting. That
huh.
that was a large part of it, actually. Yeah.
Interesting. Um, and then you've already mentioned this, but I remember talking to you about this when we were on our canoe trip a lot about your combat tours. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I did 7 deployments total during my 21 years, and
I
three
mean,
of those
sorry to
were,
interrupt. If you're 21 years in, are you like re-upping for another few years every so often? Like, how does that work?
yes. When you're enlisted, yes. So my
Okay.
first about 11 years was enlisted. So I was re-upping about every, I think, 4 years roughly. And then as an officer, it's kind of like, you're just in as long as you want to be until you either get passed over for promotion or you just resign your commission, which is what I did.
Okay.
Yeah, so 7 different deployments, and three of those were combat deployments, all to the Middle East, and yeah, yeah, difficult, obviously, difficult circumstances, difficult deployments. Yeah, but thankfully, not a lot of after effects, not a lot of like post traumatic stress residue from for me. I know a lot of guys that I served with do struggle with that.
Hmm.
I'm very grateful that I don't have a lot of that going on.
What do you think? What do you attribute that to? Is that luck or genes or something else? What do you think?
Um, from what I've studied about post traumatic stress, I I've had a couple of or I met a couple of the factors that made me lower risk. So having an education by the time that I experienced some of my more traumatic later combat tours in Iraq,
Hmm.
um, and then just I'd been in the Marine Corps, 12, 15 years by that time. So had experienced lots of training and was to some degree just had been strengthened by all of that. I was older, so I was in my 30s by that time. So
Mhm.
so from studies show that all of those factors make a person a little more resilient to the effects of post traumatic stress.
Are you? I mean, we're going to get back to that because I know the guys you work with now, some of them are suffering from that. But do you? Are you one of these guys? Do you not like to talk about the combat you saw over there, or is it something you openly talk about, or
I
how's that for
I
you?
sure I don't mind talking about it. I'll openly talk about it. I do want to. I guess my experience, there's this kind of code that um, part of my role as a warrior is to protect, the country, protect its citizens, and that to me includes protecting them from the effects of war
Hmm.
and the experience of war, through my eyes. Now, again, if they ask me, I'm going to talk about it. I don't mind talking about it. It doesn't trigger anything for me, but I'm definitely going to temper some of the details because of that.
Interesting. But if you were with other Marines, would you be more forthcoming about the details since you figured they are, they saw similar kind of things? Is that, I mean, is there like a shared language? Is it that kind of thing, or shared memory, that kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I just went to a reunion for um, my last combat tour was in Fallujah in 2004, 2005 when we invaded
Okay.
the city, and so we had a reunion. And so being around those guys, you can kind of not only let your guard down, but you can talk more freely because of that shared experience.
Yeah.
But even if I ran into service members that weren't in that battle, I could definitely talk about some things with them that I probably wouldn't normally.
Yeah. In case we have military, it's funny, I even I read a lot of war memoirs, and watched a lot of war movies and stuff like that, and I've often wondered about that. I have this very vivid experience from my freshman year in college. I took a seminar called The Iliad and Memories of War, and we read, I think, 10 different war memoirs, starting with the Iliad by Homer and working our way, up through the present day. I think the last one we read was Dispatches, which is a very famous Vietnam memoir. We read Red Badge of Courage. We read Xenophon's Anabasis from an ancient Greek book. And I remember sitting in the professor's office with another student in office hours toward the end of the seminar, and saying, like, he was asking us something about, if we thought what we thought about the class and what we thought about the writings, and I kind of fumbled through some this and that, and we're at this like bougie elite Ivy League school where we're completely insulated from any kind of combat or conflict or anything like that. And the other student said something to the effect of, I think I'll probably never, I mean, pardon me for the, misogyny of his statement, but or the male centrism of his statement, but he said, I think I'll never know what it's like to actually be a man because I will never serve in combat. And the professor almost came out of his seat and said, yes, that's it. Like, that's the point of this. And
Right.
I've struggled with that as somebody who not only didn't serve, but really didn't even have the opportunity to, or it never really occurred to me. And I don't know. I mean, I don't really know if I have a question other than asking you if you can, like, tell me I'm going to be okay, even though I never saw combat or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think you'll be okay.
I
Uh,
mean, what do you think it does to somebody to see what you saw? Other than obviously provoking some people, some real trauma experiences and a hard time getting over that. But are there other parts of it? Benefits? Is it a band of brothers? Is it, did it make you a better human being or a better Christian?
Wow, those are
Or
those
is
are
it
lots of
all
questions.
just a waste? Is it all just a waste and the only reason you had to go fight was because of, our sinful human natures or something?
Right. Um, it definitely made me a better human being in the sense of I think it broadened my perspective of service and sacrifice for others. Like when I went to Iraq to liberate the country, I personally was going to liberate the people, and so that was my
Hmm.
lots of my interactions had to do with that very thing is how can we give these people a chance in their country, not necessarily to have what we as Americans have, but to give them a choice for what they want, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's capitalism or something else. So um, so I felt like I already had this. I was already drawn to service and sacrifice for others. The military just kind of it channeled that and allowed me to do it in specific ways and in places I normally wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and so it broadened my perspective of maybe serving people that are very different than me, that believe very different than me, that in some ways are not very different than me. They want good things for their family, and they want their kids to grow up better than them. Like all of those things that we as Americans take very seriously. I saw that in other peoples throughout the world,
Interesting.
and so that gave me hope, actually, that we are all very similar in some
Yeah.
ways, and we are all in this together, so to speak.
But does it, at the same time it gives you hope, does it also cause you any distress that the way we seem to have to bring this about is through armed conflict? I mean,
It
do you
didn't
think that?
used to.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, yeah, but
Yeah,
the first, but
it didn't used to. Obviously, spending that long in the military, I didn't have a problem with it until towards the end. I had this moment when it was in Fallujah, and we're on top of this building, and I'm controlling like indirect fires and aircraft and stuff, and so my team we're clicking and we're doing what we got to do, and we have this building about 200 meters away, and we drop a bomb from an aircraft 10,000 feet up. We dropped this 500-pound bomb on this building, and it was nighttime, and the building goes up in this huge ball of flame, and my Marines are like jumping up and down and celebrating, and it was literally in that moment I felt this like despair. I'm like,
mm,
how did we get here where we are celebrating the demise of other human beings like this? I not this is very difficult for me. This is very unexpected that this would be my reaction. So that was at my 15-year mark in the Marines, and
mm,
and I would say that started my journey of exiting out of the military, but it also started my journey back to being in a relationship with a God that, for the most part, I did not trust.
Tell me about that. So when you were in those first 15 years in the Marines, had you grown up in a faithful home?
Yes, so I grew up Southern Baptist, in Arkansas, and my
Uh-huh.
family had been in ministry together. Actually, I had three older sisters, and my parents at that time were still married, and we were in volunteer ministry where we would go around on Saturday and we would invite people to church, and then on Sunday we would my dad would drive this school bus around, and we would paint it in the colors of our church, and
Yeah, of course.
we would pick these people up. And so from an early age, church or being a Christian was very centered around service
Okay.
and giving to others both time and resources. And so that was very formative, as you can imagine. And then my dad, when I was 10, decided to run off with another woman that he had been having an affair with, not from the church, but but basically started a new life and a new family with someone else. And my family, that we had been poor up until that point, but we became really poor after that. And the church where we had been in ministry did not offer any help, both spiritually. I mean, they wouldn't even pray with my mom. They basically they did this thing called shunning. You probably heard of it.
Oh, geez.
Shunning, where they basically treat you like shit until you stop going. So that's what we did. We stopped going, and so my little 10-year-old mind was devastated by that. This place that had been refuge and a sense of purpose now was like there was nothing. So it makes sense that right around that time, I decided to join the military and get that sense of purpose and serving.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I didn't do it till years later, but I decided right around that time. Yeah.
And
so that led to years
ahead.
and that led to years and years of anger at God. Again, just lumping into, Christianity, God, all of that is, I was wounded by all of that. And it took, that being on that rooftop in Fallujah, I would say that it was right after that I recognized, okay, what I had been pursuing was ultimately not fulfilling. I thought it would be, and ultimately it is empty, and it is in some ways ugly. And so that led me to want to be open to God again.
Okay, pause right there. You guys,
Sure.
both Brandon and Billy, hold on 1 second. Still there? My wife has had this super expensive camera lens coming, and she's like, I'm sure it won't come between 2 and 3, but if it does, you have to sign for it or they won't leave it. And sure enough. Okay, yeah, right at the most poignant moment of your... Okay. So this happened.
All right,
do you think then I'm going to journey back to God, or did that take some time? I mean, it's to go from that, that building exploding and having that kind of existential moment of like, these guys around me are cheering, I feel no joy in this. And then 7 years later, or 6 years later, you retire from the military and go to seminary. What was that journey like in those years?
Well, back up. So at that time on the rooftop, like literally the next day, I did what a good Southern Baptist would do, is I'm going to pray and I'm going to read the Bible, and I'm going to wait for God to speak to me somehow. And so that's what I did. So I read all of the Gospels while I'm sitting in Fallujah, in the midst of this battle.
Did you have to borrow a Bible from somebody, or I suppose the Gideons pass them out to all the Marines, or?
I don't. That's a good question. I don't know where I got the Bible. I think it was probably just a New Testament, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Those are. Yeah, we usually started fires, at night because we had so many. So I'm just kidding. We did not burn Bibles. We did not. I'm just kidding. So,
but there were quite a few Bibles lying around, I'm sure.
Yeah, and we were relatively stationary. I mean, we were moving through the city of Fallujah, but we had a forward operating base at that time, so that we went back to. So we had places to keep things, and so finding a Bible was not hard. And yeah, so that's what I did. I found the Bible and read through the Gospels, and nothing. I don't even remember anything that I read. There was no kind of message from God. So I just kind of put it on the back burner at that point. And yeah, and didn't think about it a whole lot until a few years later and deciding what I'm going to do after I retire. And so I thought, well, why don't I, as a good Marine, I should probably get some more training, right?
Yeah.
So why don't I try, Bible training? What's
Huh.
seminary? Well, I don't know. Let's take a look at that. So so literally I stopped work on a Thursday, and that following Monday is when I started seminary.
Wow. That must have been quite the whiplash situation, because those are
It
two
was.
pretty different worlds. Combat in the Marine Corps to uh, a very conservative biblical seminary.
Yeah, it surely was. Although, it was Talbot, so Talbot is pretty uh, Talbot School of Theology is part of Biola, pretty regimented,
Hmm.
pretty lockstep in some ways, and so I think that it made that transition easier because of that.
Okay. Um, Looking back on your military service, how does that sit with you now? I mean, you obviously have had some time to reflect on it, think back on it. Maybe you're looking at it through this lens of Christian ministry. Um, what do you think about our country's, I don't know, it's ongoing conflicts?
Hmm.
Does it work? Like did you achieve what you set out to achieve, or do you look back? It seems like there's the one way to look at that military service is it was effective, and that's what we've got to do. That's America's role in the world. And there's another more cynical perspective. It's like, I was a kid out of high school who didn't go to college, and right away, and then was kind of swept into this thing and was used by very wealthy, powerful people and corporations to fight wars we didn't really need to fight. And surely there's a whole spectrum in between those two poles.
Sure, sure. I don't feel that the last part you said about I don't feel taken advantage of simply because I was a volunteer and I could have left, you know, at the end of my obligated service, I could have left, and so
Yeah.
I definitely don't feel that. I think for sure I look back on it and I think that if I would have been more mature at the time, I may have chosen a different way to serve. Or maybe I would have served in the military and then maybe got out and served in other ways. But I definitely don't regret it, and I think that there's a lot of similarities between um, going through the hardship of training and going through the hardship of combat. Many lessons that I learned that are directly applicable to what I'm doing now, helping people in recovery
Hmm.
and working through their addiction issues as I continue to work through my own addiction issues.
Yeah.
And yeah, and just recognizing that it takes resolve to continue to battle addiction.
Hmm.
And yeah, in many ways, obviously it took resolve to do what I had to do in the military. So
Yeah.
yeah,
When did you when did you first realize that you had issues with addiction?
um, It was towards the time that I was getting out of the Marines. Obviously, as you can imagine, the Marines not only allow drinking, but they encourage it. Um, you get promoted faster the more you can drink. And I'm just kidding. That's not true. But
But how do they? I mean, it
but
would seem no. I mean, that does surprise me actually, because it would seem like what they want is you to be in like superior mental and physical shape, and I mean, drinking would seem to run counter to that. But is it? Explain that to me.
Oh, but think about it. If I can do both, if I can drink all night and
Oh,
then I can get up and do my job, oh, I'm even more of a badass, right?
interesting. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it was towards the end of my time in the Marines, and I I never let my drinking and my career clash. Like I was able to keep those two very separate. And towards the end, like my last deployment was already over, and I was just kind of waiting, until my time to get out. But I was still a commander, and I realized that I was starting to drink more and more, and I actually one morning I was doing a hike with my Marines, and I was still a little drunk,
Hmm.
and it was during that hike that I sobered up. I started to feel terrible,
Oh.
and so that's what when it started interfering with my career. That was a light went on. Okay, Billy, this is a problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that led to, me getting out, but then while I was in seminary, going into therapy and starting to become aware of the 12 steps and started to become involved in 12-step communities, or what I call recovery communities.
Mm-hmm. Okay, before we
Yeah.
leave military service behind, I'm guessing that there's might be listeners who are like, Tony, why didn't you ask him what unit he was in? Because I hear those things and they mean
Mhm.
nothing to me, but I wish they did, but I can't. But can you tell what was that? What unit were you in, or how would you define? I don't even know the right terminology for it.
Sure. I served mainly in First Marines, which is West Coast, Camp Pendleton. So my last couple of tours, I was with 3-1, so 3rd Battalion, First Marines, and then my last deployment was with 1st Battalion, First Marines. And so I was actually a company commander with both of those battalions.
Okay, company
And
commander. And
so yeah,
what
yep,
was the highest rank you achieved?
captain.
Okay. And when you one last thing, when you try to leave, does anybody try to convince you to stay? Are they like, Billy,
Sure.
man, you're awesome, dude. You don't leave. You're going to become a colonel or something. I don't know what's after captain, but
Yeah, there were some people, some commanders. The biggest compliment was getting commanders to, guys that I'd served with, that I served under, that tried to convince me to stay in, and that was, um, that for sure made me feel good. But I knew the Marine Corps is a machine that the day after you're gone, they don't even remember you. I mean,
oh,
they don't even skip a beat, because they can't. That's the
right,
nature
right,
of it. So
yeah,
so yeah. So it was like, my unit that I was retiring from, they were looking to go to Afghanistan on their next deployment, and the battalion commander wanted me to stay for that, and it's like, no, no, thank you. You guys have
Hmm.
fun though.
Fun. I don't know. That's a different definition of fun. Um, I remember a conversation you and I had that really left a profound impact on me, and I'd like to continue that conversation with you now. And it's about guns.
Hmm.
It's about firearms. Um, and I'm a hunter, and we've talked about that, and I want to talk to you some about the hunting you do on your farm and stuff, and with your guests
Hmm.
even. But I was interested to talk to you when we were canoeing together because you had, I thought, you had very strong opinions about guns, and it impressed me how you talked about a gun as a tool, as I recall, and one that you didn't shy away from talking about. And I'll tell you what, as a progressive theologian and hunter and firearms owner, I am always skittish in talking about firearms, especially with people who are not, hunters or firearms owners.
Sure.
It just seems so touchy in our context today and in our society, and for good reasons. Now, 3 years have passed since you and I had that conversation, and there's been even more gun violence in the United States since you and I were together. Where do you sit right now with firearms as somebody who has received so much training and used so many firearms and used them in combat situations even?
Sure. I really enjoy guns. I like to shoot recreationally. I have some steel targets set up that I like to shoot, with pistol and rifle. I do like to hunt, of course. And so they're very enjoyable for me, and I get some fulfillment from them. But
do you feel weird saying that? Do you feel weird saying I get enjoyment from shooting guns?
No, not at all. Not at all. But I would gladly give up some of them. I would be open to giving up all of them if we had a plan, if we could come up with a plan that would curtail or stop the violence in this country. I surely would. I am open to that, and I'm open to people coming up with solutions. I don't think the solution. I don't think it's fair to me or the American people to say you have to give up all of your guns, right away. I don't think that's fair. Not only based on our Constitution, but just based on the environment and just human nature of having the freedom to own these things and getting fulfillment from them. But I think we have to be honest that there is a problem with gun violence, and we have to be open to the possibility that, hey, this thing that we get fulfillment from, if it's also causing the death of people that we know and don't know, we need to take a look at that. Not just as Christians, but just as people, like just as logical people. You have to, in my opinion. It's unavoidable. And so that's where I sit now. Is that I'm open. I'm open to a plan that will slow or stop the violence in this country that is at the hands of people with guns.
I mean, one thing that you said that impressed me a lot and has stuck with me, and I've often thought about it, honestly, since we had this conversation, is, you were talking at the time you had not yet started Sanctuary Farm. You would maybe just moved there, and you were in April. We're in the open beginning stages of it. You had not yet hosted a guest, and you talked about. I think you talked about even if you were to have, let's say somebody who gets out of prison and is coming to Sanctuary Farm as kind of their part of their halfway house and recovery, that you would even take them out shooting, even somebody who maybe is forbidden from ever owning a firearm because they're a convicted felon. Nevertheless, this is how I remember you telling it to me. Like, they still should have a healthy respect for firearms, know how to use them, because even though they're forbidden from, ever owning a firearm, most likely a firearm is going to come across their, they're going to have experience with firearms in the future.
Right.
And that surprised me too, because I mean, there is at first blush, maybe a bit of a if somebody comes rolls down I assume you got a gravel driveway at the Sanctuary Farm. Okay, somebody comes rolling down. You can just hear the wheels kind of rolling down the gravel driveway, and you see the sign. It says Sanctuary Farm, and then you hear bam, 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 bam. And there's Billy out shooting targets. Like that is. It just seems a bit of an oxymoron that people would come to Sanctuary Farm and they would learn how to shoot firearms. But I love it. I mean, I'm not criticizing you. I love the paradoxes that are a part of what you're doing. So yeah, where are you at now with that? Well, first of all, I mean, I've been mentioning Sanctuary Farm. You should tell us. I know about it, and I get your newsletter, and I recommend a lot of other people should go to your sanctuaryfarm.org and sign up for your email newsletter too. But tell us what you do there, how you came upon that farm, and how you're using it.
So when I was working as a chaplain in Los Angeles, part of what I saw men and women trying to get out of addiction, but they were in the same place where they were living in the addiction. They weren't removing themselves, or weren't able to remove themselves from that location. And so initially my thought was, hey, if I get a farm, offsite, then maybe I could contribute to, getting people out of their addiction through just taking them off site, and that led to pursuing buying a farm that had been in my family. It was actually my mom's farm, and it wasn't being used. And so my wife and I came and visited it and checked it out. And of course I'd been there before, but I was just kind of showing her around, and lots of prayer, and so we finally decided to do that, to actually buy the farm and then move out to Arkansas and start the Sanctuary Farm. Again, the idea was to provide a place of refuge for anyone experiencing the effects of addiction or trauma, and then that led us to partnering with a local jail, like the county jail, and inviting inmates from the jail to stay on the farm and work on their addiction issues while they're guests here. So that's essentially what we do. And we also rescue alpacas.
Okay.
Which are, it seems kind of random. My wife has always liked alpacas, and so we have 10 that we have rescued. Everything from going to like a sale barn, like there's like a single alpaca and like nobody knows what it is, and we'll buy it and bring it back.
What's an alpaca go for these days?
At the sale barn, $500 or less. Not very much.
Okay.
Because again, most people don't really want
them.
They don't find them useful. We find them useful. Most people don't find them useful. Well, the wool is it's actually better quality than sheep's wool, and so my wife makes yarn out of the wool, and then makes things out of the yarn like hats and stuff. Yeah, we'll send you a hat. And
I'd love it. Dude, I would love a hat. That would be awesome.
But we also use them for in the program. Alpacas are very strange in that they don't trust very easy, and you can't just go up to an alpaca and start petting it. They don't like to be petted. You have to work on building trust with them. And so one of the things that I teach our guests is that trust should be earned from both ways. Like we shouldn't just extend trust to people on the spot. They need to earn it from us, but we also need to earn trust of other people. And so that's one of the lessons that I can teach them through alpacas. Yeah.
Tell me about the guys who come from the jail. What's their experience like when they end up at your farm?
Most of them are very confused by by a former Marine who I typically have long hair and a beard,
Mm-hmm.
and I curse a little sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're often, it takes them a while to figure out what is going on, like what is this place, Sanctuary Farm, and how are they able to how are they able to maybe get their life going in a different direction with this hippie looking dude who you know who knows the Bible and can teach the Bible, but
Yeah, I mean, are
also
they told back at the jail that they're
curses.
going out to see a pastor or something, and they probably have a very different
I
image in their mind of what a pastor is?
I usually go and interview them, and
Okay.
so when they're in the jail, they're still in the jumpsuit, and I go, the striped jumpsuit, I go and talk to them and just tell them a little bit about the program. Of course, they're wanting to get out of there.
Yeah.
Um, who wouldn't, But I definitely talk to them about the length of the program, which is initially 6 months for them, and that can be extended. But just the internal work that we will be doing that will not
Yeah.
be comfortable. And so most guys that we've had, they typically are very comfortable working with their hands. Most of them know more about farming or building stuff. They know more than I do,
Hmm.
and that's fine. I can learn from them. I have learned tons from them.
Yeah.
But when it comes to going deeper and trying to figure out why they use, like what led to this addiction in the first place, and why do they keep going back to it even though they know it's damaging them and their relationships, that is typically very difficult for them, as it was for me when I first started this walk in recovery.
Hmm.
So I think my experience of leading in adverse conditions and leading people that are experiencing the effects of what we call human factors, which is I don't want to talk about my stuff. I don't want to talk about my childhood. I don't want to talk about being sexually molested when I was 8. I don't want to talk about those things,
Mm-hmm.
but I try to show them that, well, I do show them that we need to. We don't want to. We need to in order to figure out what's really going on inside of us.
Hmm. Wow, that's intense, man. I mean, I think just what you're doing is, I have so much respect for it, and I think it's so gutsy and so like it's such a, I don't know, I'm humbled by it, that by your ministry, because I think it's really the kind of ministry that if more of us who are called into ministry did it, the world, we would actually move the needle on making the world a better place. So I'm a huge
Sure.
fan.
Thanks.
What can people? Well, yeah, I mean, for sure, and I desperately want to get down there and hunt with you. What would we hunt if I came down there? I think you've mentioned deer and
Well,
turkeys to me before.
yeah, sure. Deer season is coming up. I'm doing a lot of deer season prep right now, so getting food plots ready, and
Nice.
putting out the corn. Got this, going around and getting the stands all, making sure they're tied up against the trees, and yeah, getting ready for that.
Deer
That's
guests,
that's pretty exciting.
deer hunt with you.
They do, yeah. They got 4 deer. We had 3 guests last year, and they got a total of 4 deer. So
Wow.
that was really good. We had lots of lots of meat last year.
I'm guessing you guys do all the butchering and everything yourself there on site at the farm.
We don't do it all. We did do some, but we have
Mm-hmm.
a local place that we take it to. We like to support them and keep them going.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you got some turkeys roaming around there too.
We do have. I have not been turkey hunting lately, but we do have some turkeys for sure. So that might be something we could set up as well.
That's awesome, man. And how big? I'm guessing the deer in Arkansas grow a little bit bigger than the deer in Minnesota. I mean, for one thing, because we have CWD up here, we're not allowed to put out corn or do any kind of
Right.
bait. I mean, we can plant food plots, but that's about the extent of it. You can't put on any mineral licks or pour a bag of corn, 20 feet away from your deer stand or anything like that.
Right.
What kind
Yeah,
of
the deer
you
pretty
got some
well.
big bucks
They're pretty well fed
roaming
here.
around? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We have one. We call him Big Nasty, and he's roaming around here. He's been around a couple of years. I'd
Okay.
say he's definitely 4 or 5 years old. 10 pointer.
Dang.
Not for sure on the weight. Yeah, but he's pretty big.
All right. And then what's your rifle of choice for deer hunting?
Oh, I have a Tika stainless 270 with a Bushnell Elite on top, so it's a super light setup. When I shoot that thing, it makes me think the world is ending because it kicks so much and it's so loud. But oh man, it shoots so well. It's got a great trigger on it, and yeah, it's a good rifle. I like the
That's
270
awesome.
cartridge a lot.
Okay. I'm a 30-06
Very
guy
flat.
myself. Yeah. So
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah. I mean, I like it. Are you hunting in the woods or out over a cornfield or what?
Both. Both. I have stands, both in the woods, and then we have. My biggest food plot is right next to a pond that's in a field. So I have a blind for that one. So that would be rifle only.
Yeah. And you do some bow hunting too?
I do. Yeah. Bow,
Dang.
regular bow, and then but my goal is I have a recurve
Hmm.
that I've been training with, and so my goal is to take a deer with an actual traditional bow, but haven't done that yet.
What's your range you think on that? Your lethal range?
Probably 30 yards would be max. Yeah,
Okay.
but I would feel way more comfortable 15 to 20. Yeah.
Yeah. Dang, man. That sounds pretty good. You got to join social media so we can see some of these deer you're shooting.
Okay.
You're not
Well,
you're not really a
my
social media
wife.
guy, are you? Will she put them on? Will
No.
April put them on your Facebook page for the Sanctuary Farm?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have her do that. Yeah, we'll put them on there. Yeah, I just don't want to get caught up in social media.
I hear you.
Yeah, it's actually kind of tied to my addiction issues. I think it
Mm,
might trigger that a little bit and be a little consuming. So I just stay away.
gotcha. No, that's fair.
Yeah.
Hey, last thing. Um, when you were talking about that building blowing up in Fluge and the guys cheering, the thing I immediately thought of was how uncomfortable I am when an animal is shot when I'm hunting or even like watching a hunting show on TV and there's all sorts of cheering and high-fiving.
Hmm.
I find I guess I don't know, have you thought about that? I mean, have you thought about your approach to, you know obviously mixed kind of moral, you must have some moral feelings about being in combat and killing human beings. Where's that crossover for you of what it's like to kill a deer,
Hmm.
another living creature?
Sure. It's definitely exhilarating, and I'm with you in that. Um, like I avoid the whole like trophy shot, the picture with the
Hmm.
holding the deer's head and the rifle, or whatever you kill it
Yeah.
with laying over. I don't do that. I, I just personally like that crosses the line for me in like celebrating and making it a trophy when I don't see it as a
Hmm.
trophy. I see it as, a means of sustenance. So Um, yeah. So it does bring up, interestingly, some of the same feelings of exhilaration and that I experienced in combat whenever I'm
Yeah.
sitting there and I'm looking at this deer and I'm aimed in and I'm considering pulling the trigger that I do experience some of the same like rush. It's a
Yeah.
rush of feelings.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to describe because there's so many feelings at once. Um, yeah, so I just try to keep it respectful for sure. And and I wanted to tell you this story, Tony, because I
Yeah.
thought it was really poignant about this and about redemption. So last year, one of the guys when he killed a deer, he he did not have a hunting license, and I just made the assumption that these guys had been hunting for a while, so that was just something they did. So he didn't get a hunting license, and so when he told me that, I'm like, you got to be kidding me! Not only
Right.
is that illegal, but you're involving me and my
Yeah.
farm, and all of that. So I was pretty upset, and so and then that led to other conversations with the other guests, and come to find out they had been fishing without a fishing license, and I'm sitting there
Hmm.
like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. So so I actually I said, look guys, like we need to make this right, and so I called the game warden and I told him what was going on, and I said, look, this happened, but I asked for grace in this situation. But I also want you to come talk to the guys. And so he did,
Hmm.
and each of the guys admitted what they had done wrong, and he thanked them for doing that, from not hiding from the fact that they had hunted or fished illegally, and then forgave them, and and it was really awesome because not only were they having to, like, this was part of their recovery, right? Having to face something they had done wrong, but he was representative of law enforcement, and all three of those guys were they were facing felony charges, and
Wow.
so having this face to face conversation with the authority, and it turning out the way that it did, I thought was very redemptive. I mean, they they talked about it for a couple of weeks after that, and they were just
That's
smiling and
powerful.
laughing, and it was
Yeah.
yeah, it was really cool.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, I'm sure those are guys who have not really had many positive encounters with law enforcement.
Sure,
So that's
exactly.
awesome. Well, how can people support you? What can people do to help you out, support Sanctuary Farm?
Sure. Go to our website, sanctuaryfarm.org. You can sign up for the newsletter. You can email me if you know anybody that might benefit from coming to our farm, either for recovery purposes or for respite if they just want to come visit. We actually just got a new cottage that we're um, uh, developing the inside. Just it's kind of like a tiny home cottage, and that'll be for temporary guests. Um, so they can reach us there. They can email me directly through the website. You can also
Mhm.
support us either through donations through the website, or we're actually signed up with Amazon. The smile.amazon.com.
Oh, there you
Uh,
go.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a great
Mm-hmm.
great way to do it. Okay.
Sure.
And you can buy some of April's stuff, I think, on if you go to the local farmers market, huh?
Yeah, and she has them on eBay too. She has some stuff on
Okay.
eBay, but yeah, hats and dryer balls are actually very popular. We make dryer balls
Okay.
out of alpaca fur, and yeah, that they do really well.
Awesome. Well, Billy, it's great talking to you. I miss, seeing you. I wish I could see you more often, but we're gonna have to make it happen so we can hunt together or go on another canoe trip or do something like that.
That sounds good. Yeah, it'd be good to see you again.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks. Thanks a million for coming on. Take care.
You bet, Tony. Thanks for having me. Take care. Bye bye.
Wow, Brandon, that was a great interview. Thanks. You did such a nice job recording and engineering and producing it.
Well, thanks, Tony. I thought it was a great episode as well, and you did such a great job of hosting it.
Aw, thank you.
What if some people out there listening thought the same thing as us and just wanted to throw their sponsorship towards the show? How would they be able to do that, Tony?
Oh, we would love more sponsors at the Reverend Hunter podcast. If people want to do that, they can get a hold of Karen Cleary at the Talk North Podcast Network, and her email is kcleary, that's KCleary at talknorth.com. And she will tell you everything you need to know about sponsoring the Reverend Hunter podcast. We would love to have you as a partner on this show. Thanks a lot. Great question, Brandon.
Oh, thanks for throwing it out there for me like it was completely unplanned.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Goodbye.